Hello students, welcome to the next session of the psychology lecture discussion series. And today's topic of my discussion, I'll be mainly focusing upon the Piaget's cognitive development theory. This cognitive theory of development of the human mind by Jean Piaget was the given in the year 1952. And before getting into the detailed description as to what does this theory actually say and how it relates to the child psychology, I would like to give you a a psychologist. So he was much into these psychological thinking processes. His mind was continuously involved in certain aspects of study such as the philosophy and psychology, and he belonged to Switzerland. And this theory, that is the cognitive development theory, was the work which was done by him on his own children. So, on his own children, he saw his children growing up with age and saw their instincts and their development. And on that basis, he gave the present theory, which is known as the cognitive development theory by Jean Piaget. So, it was his theory which was the outcome of this theory was due to the experimental work which was done on his own children. So, in the former years of his life, just imagine, students, he was so much engrossed in such studies that he was much into studies on animals. Initially, during the earlier stage of his life, Piaget was very much interested or keen in studies with animals, and his first study was on the albino sparrows, which was published in 1907 at when Piaget was just 11 years of age. So he was very much keen and interested in studies on psychology or on the behavior of the human intellect or the intellectual mind or the human intellect. He was much focused. Later on, along with his wife, he did his experimental work even on humans. And that's why Piaget, till now, till date, he is being referred to as, in most of the, he is being referred to as the father of child psychology. So, one particular, the striking fact, what I would like to mention about Jean Piaget, it is that Piaget, he is actually a believer of a term what is called as the radical constructivism. So radical constructivism is a term or is a phenomena which greatly says, which mostly implies that a child's cognitive development will take place by itself. We need not teach the child about a particular thing, but the child will learn things by himself. So this was the radical constructivism. So this radical constructivism, it is basically a phenomena which says that a child need not to be taught everything. He will learn slowly and gradually by himself. So the other word, that the literal meaning of the word constructivism, it is that in our brain or in our mind, there are certain small packets or bundles of memories, or certain kinds of small units are there which the information is stored in the form of small chunks, and these small chunks, when added together, they are going to constitute a bigger concept. So this was the basic fundamental principle what Piaget has given, that within the human mind there are various small packets or chunks of memory, and these packets or chunks or small tiny areas of information, when they are got or merged together, they form a bigger concept. So this was actually what it is referred to as constructivism. And Piaget emphasized on radical constructivism, which literally means that a child should not be taught everything, will himself learn things by himself over a period of time. So, moving on to the basic concepts. So, this cognitive theory development has been broadly subdivided and studied into two broad perspectives. First is cognitive structure, and next is the cognitive functioning. So, Piaget has given this model of his on two bases. First is the cognitive structure, and next is the cognitive functioning. So the cognitive structure basically comprises of a term what was given by Piaget was schemas. So these are their schemas in one line definition when we need to define that what is actually a schema. So a schema refers to any basic instincts with which a child is born with. All right. So all the basic instincts or traits which are inherited congenitally, which are present since birth within a child, they are referred to as schemas. And these schemas are basically the knowledge what is present within the child in the form of basic instincts such as grasping a particular thing, trying to suckle anything, suck anything, trying to grasp, suck, or even trying to hold on a particular thing. So these are the basic instincts what a child is most of the children what a child is born with. So these basic set of instincts with which a child is born with is referred to as the schemas, and these schemas such as these are the schemas what will come into play into the various stages of the cognitive development. So another term what I would like to mention next, the part what I'll be emphasizing upon it is the cognitive functioning. So the cognitive functioning basically comprises of the three phenomena. First, it is the assimilation. Next, it is the accommodation, and third, it is the equilibration. So assimilation. So assimilation, it is in if in one line, if I need to define it, so assimilation is matching the information or the thoughts process what the child is having as the basic instincts to suffice or meet to the environmental needs. For example, in the childhood, in the very young infancy stage, we observe children that whatever thing they find, since their basic instinct is just oral gratification, they want to just put everything within their mouth to have a understanding of it. So this process of assimilation, it is referring to that phenomena where a child is in the habit of matching those process those the where the child is going to match the knowledge what he has already acquired to that to meet or to suffice to the environmental needs. So basically, this is the process of assimilation. Next is the process of accommodation. So accommodation is that process where a child is going to, when the environmental, whatever the knowledge, whatever the information, what the child has assimilated, if it is not working to suffice to the environmental needs, so what is going to happen is the child will adopt or resort to newer ways of thinking. So the best example by which we can understand about assimilation and accommodation, the examples what I'll be referring to is, it is initially in most of the children, what do they feel? That every flying object in the sky refers to a bird. So whenever during the early stage of development, whenever if a child, because the set of information what he is already having in the mind in during the childhood, during the infancy stage, is whatever object is going to fly in the sky, that will be called as a bird. So as the in the infancy days, whatever things are flying in the sky, the child literally calls. But as time passes by, and whenever he once, if a child finds an aeroplane flying in the sky, in that condition also, in that situation also, the child is going to call that aeroplane to be a bird. So when he is taught by his mother that, no, son, that's not a bird, that's an aeroplane. So, this adjustment, this accommodation of his thought process, of his learning process, the what previously he has assimilated was every flying object in the sky, it is the bird. But when he's taught by his mother that when his mother saw that aeroplane flying in the sky, the child is referring to be it to be a bird. So his mother is now going to teach him that no, that's not a bird, that's an aeroplane. So this knowledge of the child of every flying object in the sky as a bird is now being transformed, or is now being altered to upgrade his information and to accommodate a new information to meet to the environmental needs, is called as accommodation. So basically it is dealing with adjusting to the new way of thinking, the new way. The child is the knowledge what he has already assimilated during the assimilation process. In the accommodation phase, the child is now going to accommodate to the adjust to the new way of thinking, or the old fashioned thinking of his is now sufficient in is not sufficient enough to solve or tackle the problem what he is having. That's why he adopts or resorts to new way of thinking. So the old schemas, what was already there, schemas are the set of information or the instincts what the child is holding. So the old schemas are not sufficient enough to adjust to the new environment. That's why now the child is going to accommodate to the newer feelings, to the newer thought processes, that he now learns to segregate that whatever be the flying object in the sky, it could be a bird, it could be a helicopter, it could be an aeroplane. So now his the old fashioned schemas, the old fashioned thought processes, he is going to resort to a newer way of thinking. So that is all what is called as the accommodation. So with this example, I've tried my level best to simplify the difference between assimilation and accommodation. And finally, the third stage, what comes under the cognitive functioning, it is the equilibration. So the assimilated in the previous stages, the stage of assimilation, the stage of accommodation, we have already studied. So whatever the assimilated or the accommodated information what the child is having, and that assimilated or the accommodated knowledge what the child is having, that is going to help him to maintain a harmonious relation between himself and to the environment. So this stage where the child is where the child develops a harmonious relation between the environment and himself on the basis of the assimilated knowledge or the accommodation what he has learned, the newer way of thinking what he has resorted to, that is basically referred to as the equilibration. So students, this was a short discussion about the cognitive structure and the cognitive functioning. So the cognitive structure basically comprises of the schemas, and these schemas are the set of instincts or the basic information what the child is holding since birth. These basic instincts can be looking for, can be grasping, can be sucking, etc. Now moving on to the next stage, that is the four stages of the cognitive development. So students, beginning with, so Piaget has described the entire life of the cognitive development or the intellectual development into the four stage. So the first stage, it is the sensory motor stage, which begins from birth and lasts up till the 2 years. So the striking distinguishing facts I would like to emphasize over here. So the sensory motor stage, as the word itself is suggesting, that the sensory. Now, since the age group, what is restricted to this particular time, it is from 0 to 2 years. So the child is basically in the habit of making use of his senses. He's going to make use of his senses to interact to the external environment. The senses could be the child now wants to smell the flowers. The child wants to taste the food. The child wants to hear music. The child wants to see a particular thing. The child wants to talk to the other people. So these are the basic set of instincts or the basic senses what the child is adopting to communicate with the external world. So this, the stage, that is the sensory part I have discussed. So where the child is going to make use of senses, and Piaget says that these sensory activities, these sensory reflexes what are there, is ultimately going to lead to the cognitive development. These all senses what are being working in different spheres of the brain, in different areas of the brain, what is being getting activated by such reflexes of looking, smelling, tasting, uh, touching, or talking, or communicating with the world, is now what that is going to lead to the cognitive development. The sensory part of the sensory motor stage I have discussed. Next is the motor stage. So it is during this phase between 0 to 2 years, the motor skills, particularly the gross motor skills, develop of the child. So the gross motor skills are basically focused on when the child, which was lying in a cradle, throwing his arms and legs, looking at the toy, what is of the cradle. From that particular stage, when the child learns to sit, the child is now learns to crawl, the child when learns to walk, and even afterwards the child begins running. So these all motor activities, these all gross motor activities, they are ultimately leading to the cognitive development of the child. So students, this was the first of the sensory motor stage, and the striking distinguishing fact what needs to be emphasized over here, that it is increased in the bodily activities, increased in the body movements, that is going to lead to cognitive development. The intellectual development occurs through senses. When the child makes use of different types of senses, the intellectual development begins by senses. Next striking fact what needs to be emphasized, it is okay. The striking distinguishing fact what needs to be emphasized is it is the imitative behavior. So during this stage, in most of the cases between 0 to 2 years, it has been found that infants and toddlers, they are very much into imitating. They imitate their whomsoever they find. And after that, one thing more what I would like to emphasize, that within that sensory motor stage, what the child feels that the object is transitory, means the child feels that what is out of sight is out of mind. Supposing if I show a child between 0 to 2 years of age, show a child a teddy. So once the teddy, if I'm showing is, the child is able to look at the teddy, but once if I hide that teddy, the child will feel that the teddy no longer exists. So it is during the sensory motor stage, the child thinks that objects what are visible to him, they are transitory. So this transitory objects are quite transitory. This phase is basically seen in the sensory motor stage. Up till the 10th month, this objects are transitory. The child feels that the objects are transitory. In most of the cases, when we say that this particular toy is there, we show it to a child and say that this bird has taken it, that the toy, the bird has taken away and flown away with it. So the child thinks that it is actually gone. He never ever inquires that the object is actually existing. Means what is out of sight, that is out of mind. Another, as during the last stage, that is during the last period, that is when by the end of 2 years, this transitory feeling that the child feels that the object or the things, whatever is shown to him that is transitory, is now being abolished. And the phenomena what develops, it is the object permanence. So students, I would like to emphasize that during the last stage, during the last time of the sensory motor development, that is at the end of the 2 years, now if I show a child a teddy and if I hide it at my back, the child will inquire and try to search for the teddy. So now what is out of sight is not out of mind. So during the last stage of development, what is mostly seen, it is that object permanence develops. Once a teddy is out of his mind also, still the child knows that the teddy exists somewhere. So this is the sensory motor stage. Moving on to the next stage, that is the pre-operational stage. And this pre-operational stage lasts from between 2 to 7 years of age. Now, this pre-operational stage is, since it is having quite a longer duration, so it can be subdivided into two categories, that is the pre-conceptual phase and the intuitive phase. So the pre-conceptual phase is between the ages from 2 to 4 years, and here what do we find is that the child is far away from reality. He is unable to make any concept, and the problem of identification is there with him. So in other words, we can say that whatever all male or whatever all men, if he finds all men, he could take them to be as his father, and all women he can take them for granted, he can take them to be his mother. So the identification problems, the stage of, that is the pre-conceptual stage, that the child is in a state of very much in a confusion. There is a marked identification confusion within the child. So he can take any male person to be his father, or he can assume any lady to be his mother. So this phenomena, that the child makes lots and lots of mistakes in identification, and the concept formation is very poor. The child is basically egocentric. Now the word egocentric literally means that the child is looking at the world through his own perspective. He finds that whatever things are happening around him, that is all because for him. Means the stars are glittering, the stars are shining in the sky, it is just because of him. The rain is falling, it is because of him. His parents are only his and not of his brothers and sisters. That is his parents, they belong to him only and not to his siblings. So these are the things what the child is actually feeling. So the child is more or less egocentric. He finds that whatever things he observes the world and understands the world according to his own perspective. So this was the phenomena of egocentric. And egocentric, in this stage also, the child is absolutely not willing to share his toys or anything. So he is not in a habit of sharing or sharing his toys or any kind of whatever things are being given to him. So he is not, more of the child is egocentric, and he is not ready to share his toys or things. Even his parents also, if you call them, that he believes that his parents are only his and they don't belong to his siblings even. So the parents, they are not of his siblings, the parents belong to him only. So this was the thing. Next is centration. So centration, it is the phenomena where the child focuses on how the things appear. So during this period, that is during the pre-conceptual phase of the pre-operational stage, the child's basic instinct is to observe the things as to how the things appear. So moving on to the next thing, what is mostly seen, that it is animism. So animism can be mostly looked upon as that the child is going to relate any other thing what he has already formed, or he's having a picture in his mind. For example, if a child is very well acquainted to a cow, that it's a big animal, it's a huge animal, having 4 legs, having a tail. So whenever he will find an elephant walking away, a horse walking away, a buffalo walking away, he will call that buffalo or an elephant to be a cow. Why? Because the same set of instinct, that being the four-legged animal, the same tail, the same body structure, the child is now going to relate what he has already framed an opinion in his mind, that all four-legged animals are cows. So whether it be an elephant passing by, whether it be a horse passing by, whether it be a buffalo passing by, the child is going to call that particular animal to be as a cow. So this is the phenomena of animism. Animism is particularly when the child is going to relate to objects what he already knows about it. He will always relate to the same objects what he already knows, whether it be the same or not. So the child in the preconceptual stage is far, far away from reality. He has as such no concept formation. Moving on to the next phase, that is from 2 to 7 years, was the pre-operational stage, and the preconceptual stage lasts from 2 to 4 years, and after that from 4 to 7 years it is the intuitive phase what is seen. So this intuitive phase what is seen, it is basically where a child has a continuous quest for asking questions. The child's intuition is basically on asking continuous questions to acquire more knowledge about the environment, and the concept formation is slowly and gradually developing. So now in the pre-conceptual stage, as I have already said, that whatever the men are there, he can assume them to be his father. Whatever the women are there, he can assume that to be his mother. So he can assume it to be his mother. But in the intuitive phase, what we find is that the child is now very well aware that a particular person, he knows who is his mother, who is his father, who is his uncle, who is his aunt. So now during this stage, that is from 4 to 7 years, which is the phase which is the intuitive phase. It is during that intuitive phase a little bit progression of the concept. The child is slowly and gradually the child is developing with the concept, and this concept is now is making him to segregate between his mom and dad, the uncle and aunt. He now knows to differentiate between them. So this was the first thing. The concept formation is going to begin, and the striking distinguishing fact, what needs to be emphasized during the intuitive phase, it is the ability to reverse. Now, this can be understood with a very good example. What I would like to state, that during the ages of 4 to 7 years, if a child is being asked that, do you have a sister? So the child will answer, yes, I do have a sister. But again, if the child is questioned back in a different way, that does your sister has a younger brother, the child is unable to answer. So this ability of reversal is absolutely absent during this stage of intuitive development, where the child is unable to answer if the same thing is being questioned in a reverse manner. All right. So the next stage, that is the ability to reverse, is absent during the intuitive phase. Moving on to the conservation of terms of quality and quantity. So students, this can be better understood. That is, the conservation of terms of quality and quantity can be better understood. Supposing if I take a vessel or a beaker in which I pour some juice till this level, and again, if I take a longer beaker or a vessel in which the same quantity of the juice has been poured. So now here what is seen is that in the broader vessel, the juice or the liquid, the juice or the whatever this liquid is there, which is pleasing to the child. So this juice level is in the broader vessel to a lower level, whereas the same quantity of the juice, if it is poured in a taller or a longer vessel, it is going to raise a particular height. And so if a child is asked to choose between these two, which is containing more and which one he wants to drink, So the child is certainly going to opt for this, that the taller vessel, since the taller vessel is going to contain more of the liquid or the juice, so the child is happily going to take this as an option and would feel like taking this to drink. So students, so this was the conservation of terms of quality and quantity. These are absolutely absent. Although in both the vessels, the quantity of the juice was same, but still, when it is shown to a child during the intuitive phase, he is unable to segregate between these two things, and he wishes for the longer vessel. He was going to take the juice from the longer vessel. He will opt for this. So these are the two qualities what are absolutely absent during the intuitive phase. Another example, this was about the quantity what I have discussed. Another example what needs to be emphasized, that if I show a child a string and on which the beads are present, so whatever the beads are present on the string, once we show it to a child, and if in these beads are little bit farther or separated from each other, and if another string is shown to the child which is again containing the same number of beads, but they are much adapted, but they are much aligned much closer. So if it is shown to the child and if it is asked that which of the string is going to contain more number of beads, the child is absolutely unable to answer, and he will opt for the beads with the string in which the beads are separated quite apart, because the beads are lying in a larger distance. So the child is going to opt for this string. So again, that is the conservation of quality, whether it be the quality or it be the quantity. The child is unable to differentiate between these two phenomena during the intuitive phase. Moving on to the next stage of the cognitive development, that is the concrete operational stage, which is going to last from 7 to 12 years. 7 to 12 years. And here the thinking is becoming more of logical. So concrete operations develop. The striking facts what needs to be emphasized, I will not extend this to much longer discussion. So thinking becomes logical and systematic during the concrete operational stage, which lasts from 7 to 12 years. Now the child has an ability to reverse, and the conservation of quality and quantity he now understands well. So whatever things what were lacking in the pre-operational state, during the concrete operational states, the child becomes much more aware of it. So the thinking becomes logical, the ability to reverse, the ability to conserve quality and quantity, now the child is very well acquainted to. So in the pre-operational stage, I've already said that the child is more of an egocentric, but now the child is no more an egocentric in the concrete operational stage. He wishes to share he's not at all egocentric and can share his toys amongst his friends. So the process of serialization, if certain things are to be given to a child, that arrange them in ascending order or in descending order or in increasing order of their heights or something, the child is now able to serialize the things. That is the process of serialization the child can very well do. That is the complex mathematical operations, whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So these complex mathematical operations, particularly the addition and subtraction, if I tell him that 8 mangoes are there, out of them 3 you take off, how many will remain? The child is able to make out that 5 mangoes will remain. So these are the complex mathematical operations. What is visible to him, the child can very easily perform. But the facts what needs to be emphasized again over here, that it is only the concrete operations, the concrete operations what are visible to the child, he is capable of performing only them, but the abstract operations he is strictly unable to follow. He's strictly unable to accept. Supposing if I tell a child that if I have 5 toffees and you take away 2 from them, how many will remain? He'll be able to answer 3. But if I tell him that imagine a right angle triangle, so this abstract thinking of a right angle triangle, the child won't be able to understand. So it is only during the concrete operational state, the concrete mathematical operations, the child can very easily follow, the child can very easily understand, but the abstract thinking is still not developed. Now, moving on to the final or the formal operational stage, which lasts from between 12 to 15 years and onwards. So here, the abstract thinking, what was lacking behind, what was absolutely lacking during the concrete operational stage, this abstract thinking is going to develop. Now the child is well capable enough to have a high, if a problem is given to him, whether it be an abstract problem, he can frame different hypotheses, and even he can find alternative ways to solve that problem. So whatever the abstract problems what he will be going to deal in life, so these abstract problems the child is now able to face, and he can frame different hypotheses that this problem might be due to so and so reasons. He has this ability to frame such hypotheses, and even he can give alternative solutions to it. Moving on, and this abstract thinking can make him lead to help him in solving life problems. So students, and according to Piaget, the fact finally what I would like to emphasize, that it is during, Piaget considers that the entire cognitive development is going to end by the formal operational stage. Once the formal operational stage has reached, Piaget considered that the entire cognitive development of the human being is completed. So students, this was a very short discussion. I've tried my level best to simplify the cognitive theory of Jean Piaget. Students, if you do have any queries or comments, you are most welcome to comment me in the comment section. And students who are visiting my channel for the first time, and if they haven't subscribed yet, please go do subscribe my channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you can be further updated about my newer videos. Thank you for watching.